I joked that my neighbor should join my road trip. She said okay like she'd been waiting. I was halfway through loading my truck when I made the biggest mistake of my life. I looked across the driveway at my neighbor, Emma, and jokingly called out, "You know, you could just come with me." I expected her to laugh. Instead, she stopped walking. She looked at me for a few seconds, smiled softly, and said, "Okay." Just like that. No hesitation, no surprise, just, "Okay." And somehow the way she said it made me wonder if she had been waiting for me to ask. I had lived next door to Emma for almost 2 years. We weren't strangers, but we weren't exactly close friends either. We had the kind of relationship neighbors usually have. She collected my packages when I wasn't home. I shoveled her sidewalk when it snowed. She occasionally brought me leftover food from whatever she had cooked. Sometimes we'd stand outside and talk for 10 minutes. Sometimes we'd just wave. But there had always been something about Emma that made me want to know her better. She was funny without trying, kind without making a big deal about it, and whenever she smiled at me, I found myself forgetting whatever I had been about to say. I had never told her that. I never planned to. Then one Friday morning, I decided to take a road trip. I had been working non-stop for months, and I desperately needed a break. My plan was simple. Drive north, stay at a few small towns, see the mountains, sleep in my camper for a few nights, come back when I felt like myself again. I spent the morning packing food, clothes, tools, and camping equipment into my truck. Emma was outside her house watering some plants when she noticed me. "Going somewhere?" she asked. "Yeah," I said. "Road trip." Her eyebrows lifted. "By yourself? That's the plan." Sounds peaceful. That's what I'm hoping for. She nodded and continued watering her plants. Then, without thinking, I laughed and said, "You know, you could come with me." I said it like a joke. I even smiled to make sure she knew I wasn't serious. But Emma didn't laugh. She turned off the hose. Then she looked directly at me. "Okay." I blinked. "What?" She walked toward her porch. "You said I could come." I was joking. She stopped and looked over her shoulder. I wasn't. Then she disappeared inside, completely frozen. 5 minutes later, Emma came back outside carrying a small suitcase. I stared at it. She stared at me. "So," she said, "what time are we leaving?" I laughed nervously. "You're actually coming? You invited me." "I didn't think you'd say yes." She smiled. "Maybe that's because you never really asked me anything." That sentence stayed in my head. We left an hour later. At first, the drive was awkward. Not bad awkward, just unfamiliar. I was used to driving alone. Now Emma was sitting beside me with her feet tucked underneath her, looking out the window as the houses slowly disappeared behind us. After about 30 minutes, she said, "Are you nervous?" "About the road trip?" "No." She looked at me. "About me being here?" I smiled. "Maybe a little." "Good." "Why is that good?" "Because I'm nervous too." That made both of us laugh. The tension disappeared. We started talking. Really talking. I learned that Emma loved old roadside diners, hated crowded tourist attractions, and had once driven across 3 states just to see a concert. She learned that I had a terrible sense of direction, despite pretending I didn't. We stopped at a little diner around lunchtime. The waitress looked at us and asked, "You two married?" I nearly choked on my coffee. Emma calmly said, "Not yet." The waitress smiled and walked away. I stared at Emma. She shrugged. "What? Not yet?" She laughed. I couldn't resist. For the first time I noticed something different about her. She seemed comfortable. Almost too comfortable. As if she had imagined this before. That evening, we reached a small mountain town. I had planned to stay at a campground, but heavy rain had turned the road into mud. The campground manager shook his head. "No spaces tonight." I looked at Emma. She looked at me. "Well," she said, This is romantic. I laughed. Romantic? Two people stranded in the mountains during a storm. You're enjoying this way too much. Maybe. We found a small cabin about 20 minutes away. There was only one cabin left. It had 2 bedrooms. Emma looked at me. Perfect. Perfect. That night, the rain hit the roof so hard that neither of us could sleep. I was sitting on the porch when Emma came outside carrying 2 mugs of hot chocolate. She handed one to me. Couldn't sleep? She asked. No, me neither. We sat quietly for a while. The mountains were almost invisible through the rain. Then Emma said something I didn't expect. You know why I said yes? I turned toward her. I've been wondering. She smiled. When you first moved here, you were always outside working on that truck. Yeah. And you always looked lonely. I didn't know what to say. She continued, I wanted to talk to you. Why didn't you? Because I thought you didn't want anyone around. I laughed softly. That wasn't true. I know that now. She looked down at her mug. I almost asked you to go somewhere with me a dozen times. My heart started beating faster. Why didn't you? She looked at me. Because I was waiting. For what? For you to ask. The rain continued falling around us. Suddenly her earlier okay made sense. She hadn't been surprised by my invitation. She had been waiting for it. I smiled. You could have just told me. So could you. We both laughed. The next morning, the storm had passed. We continued our trip. And something changed between us. We stopped pretending we were just neighbors. We started acting like 2 people who had finally stopped being afraid of what might happen. We took pictures at every viewpoint. We argued about which songs to play. We shared snacks. She stole my jacket when it got cold. I pretended to be annoyed. She knew I wasn't. 3 days into the trip, we reached a beautiful overlook. The entire valley stretched beneath us. Emma stood beside the railing. It's beautiful, she whispered. Yeah. She turned toward me. I wasn't talking about the view. I smiled. You're getting dangerously confident. I learned from you. We stood there quietly. Then she said, Can I ask you something? Sure. If I hadn't said yes, would you have asked me again? I thought about it. Yes. She smiled. How many times? As many as it took. Her eyes softened. Good. I looked at her. Why? Because I don't want this trip to end. Neither did I. But eventually every road trip ends. On the final morning we packed the truck. Neither of us talked much. The drive home felt completely different from the drive out. There was something hanging between us. Something neither of us wanted to say first. When we finally reached our neighborhood, I parked in my driveway. Emma got out and took her suitcase. She walked toward her house. I watched her go. Then I called out, Emma. She turned. I walked toward her. I have another question. She smiled. What? This time I'm not joking. She waited. Would you go somewhere with me again? She looked at me for a long moment. Where? Anywhere. She smiled. Just the 2 of us? Just the 2 of us. She stepped closer. Okay. I laughed. You said that pretty quickly. She looked into my eyes. I've been waiting a long time to say it. I didn't know what to say, so I did the only thing that felt right. I reached for her hand. She held it. Neither of us moved. After a few seconds, she whispered, You know, there's something funny about all of this. What? You thought you were inviting your neighbor on a road trip. And? She smiled. I thought you were finally asking me on a date. I stared at her. You thought the whole time this was a date? She laughed. I hoped it was. I shook my head. I really am terrible at this. No, she said softly. You're just slow. I laughed. Fair enough. She squeezed my hand. So where are we going next? I looked at her. Wherever you want. She thought for a moment. Somewhere far away. Why? Because if we're going to do this, She stepped closer. I don't want to be your neighbor anymore. I smiled. What do you want to be? She looked straight into my eyes. The woman sitting beside you when you drive. And that was how a stupid little joke changed my life. I had left home thinking I needed a road trip to escape my routine. What I didn't realize was that I wasn't escaping anything. I was finally driving toward something, toward her. And sometimes the person you've been waiting for isn't someone you meet on a long journey. Sometimes she's been standing right next door the entire time. You just have to be brave enough to ask, even if you think you're only joking.